All right. Well, hi, hello, and welcome to the webinar. I'm Jess,
And I'm Mackenzie.
and we are about to get into a very exciting webinar with all of you in just a few seconds here. But Mackenzie and I wanted to go through a few of the housekeeping points that we think will help you get the most out of our time here together today. So, Mackenzie, where should we start?
First, I want to draw your attention over to the questions section of your webinar console. This is the best place to get involved, get interactive, post all of your insightful questions, comments, feedback, and ideas. In fact, why don't you find the tab right now and give it a little test run by saying hi, hello, hola, whatever salutation you want to put out to the community today. And as a quick side note, that window is also the best place to reach out and let us know if you have any technical issues during the webinar. Don't forget that a browser refresh should clear up most of the common issues. But if your slides or audio aren't working, feel free just to shoot us a message in the questions tab and our team will be happy to help.
All right, well, the questions tab was a great place to start because the next stop on our guided tour of your audience console is the handouts tab. Do spend some time in the handouts tab. There are so many wonderful resources and takeaways from our conversation here today. You are going to want those to follow up on this, I promise you. So go over to the handouts tab right now, start clicking on those links, download those PDFs, open those tabs, make sure you've got those set aside. Don't go anywhere just yet. Those are for later after we wrap the webinar, because right now you're going to want to stay with us. Not only do we have a very cool webinar coming your way, we also have a prize giveaway that we want you to have in mind, because that is coming at you at the end of our session. So we will have a $250 prize giveaway at the end of our webinar. Now, all winners do need to be here live and present at the webinar, and all winners must meet the prize terms and conditions. Those are linked for you in the handouts tab that we were just chatting about. So you can head on over to the handouts tab, click and scroll down, and you will find the full T's and C's waiting for you there.
Okay, Jess, I think that's everything for the housekeeping. Let's get this webinar rolling.
Let's do it.
Hi, I'm Phil Kurz, contributing editor at TV Tech Magazine and TVTech.com. We're here today to discuss OTT, or over-the-top television. It's easy to understand why so many media companies want to cash in on OTT. It's a big pie, and many organizations want their piece. One estimate for the OTT video market in the United States alone puts 2024 revenue at $134 billion and nearly $195 billion by 2029. Others may look at the true value of OTT as being far more about getting their content and message out than revenue. Joining me to sort these and other OTT issues out are Jesse Lerman, President and CEO of Telview, Jerry Budge, Director of Technical Sales at Telview, and Rick Phelps, co-founder of Brooklyn Media. Before diving in, I want to remind members of our audience we'll be taking your questions throughout today's webinar. Please submit them as they come to mind, and I'll ask them as we proceed. Also, feel free to access the resources you see in the handouts pane. One last reminder, we will be drawing for a $250 Amazon gift card, so stick around to the end of today's webinar to find out who's our lucky winner. With all that said, it's time to get started. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Phil.
Why don't we start off with you, Jesse? Give us sort of a high-level view of what Telview does as it relates to OTT.
Sure thing. So Telview is a broadcast tech company, and we offer playout and automation solutions. That includes for on-prem, cloud, and fast channels. We also offer a full suite of cloud video services, including for live and VOD streaming, and OTT, including your own branded apps. Telview has served the channel origination needs for the top MSOs, over 100 cable and telco operators, as well as hyperlocal and PEG broadcasters. And to date, we've deployed over 4,000 channels.
Thank you. And Rick, why don't you do the same? Give us an overview of Brooklyn Media.
Yeah, so I started Brooklyn Media just about 4.5 years ago. Prior to that, I was with Liberty Global in Europe in their big playout center in Amsterdam, and then with companies like Amagi and Deluxe Entertainment within their broadcast segments. And seeing the trend of cloud technology, software as a service, and also the dramatic change into traditional broadcast into streaming, I created Brooklyn Media to take advantage of all those services as kind of a large virtual service provider, combining the best kind of microservices from technology partners to do things like playout, things like VOD distribution or OTT fulfillment, as well as live Remy type productions for sports and local insertions for that. And I've had a relationship with Telview now, I think from the beginning almost, because they're one of my strategic partners with their platforms and software applications.
Thanks. So let's talk about the OTT market just a little bit. Jesse, how would you characterize the interest level today of local broadcasters in launching their own fast channels, which are streamed over the top to viewers?
I think interest has been growing, very quickly. If you look back, just a few years ago, things were pretty sparse, for local broadcasters and fast channels. And I think now you look at some of the statistics within the top 100 fast channels now, around 30% are from TV networks. There's been some really exciting news lately, things like the Amazon Prime Video and PBS announcement, where Amazon Prime's now going to be carrying effectively best of PBS channels with ads as fast, as pure fast channels, and including with that some additional free local PBS channels. I'm not sure those other channels are monetized in the same way as fast, but that's pretty significant, within the public broadcasting and PBS space. And then within, local broadcasters initiatives in platforms like Local Now, carrying local news channels. So I think there's really been, a really strong uptick, in the past few years, and it's heating up quickly. And certainly invite Jerry and Rick to chime in as well.
That was going to be my next move. Please, gentlemen, give me your perspective.
OTT channels have been growing at a steady rate for at least a decade. And it's just the natural evolution of folks starting micro, developing a viewership base, and then looking to go beyond their geographical limits. One channel that comes to mind is a tourism destination channel that we help in Hawaii. And they're now OTTing their channel that used to be confined to the cable system that they were carried by. And now people go home and sign up to stay in touch with the beautiful islands they fell in love with. So there's, I would say, regardless the market, whether you're a traditional network affiliate, O&O type, or if you're what some folks mistakenly call new media, folks that are just getting into video, there's plenty of opportunity. But the key that everyone, I think, on this call especially would understand is that it's all about the eyes. No eyes, no prize. So just as much time needs to be spent making sure you understand your true target and that you can monetize your target and that you understand your audience accordingly. Rick, what do you think?
Rick?
Yeah, I'll just chime in and say, yeah, it was really the connected TVs is where the fast kind of took its real growth, right? Once you got smart TVs in homes, and then platforms like Roku, you had the ability to expand your existing content portfolio, but also to kind of do kind of hyper genre or hyper localization on it as well, right? So you could go to a platform and have just one specific branded series on a platform that has a lot of inventory, like an Antique Roadshow or a program like that, and take those into new territories without having to go through the traditional methods of finding a cable platform or IPTV platform and getting a carriage deal on that. And I think that was the real spread, right? And then as more households got connected with streaming platforms, you started to see the traditional VOD streaming platforms like Amazon Prime, as Jesse mentions, to do streaming linear channels as well, where you can, hyper target on a specific demographic or type of genre that meets that demand, right? And I think now what you're starting to see now is you're going to start to see more localized content, as Telview has great experience with, being on these platforms as well, whether that be local news, local weather, and local sports is the next one that I'm seeing a lot of interest in around live sports on these fast type platforms.
So for the Telview team here, and either one of you may answer this, what do you see as the biggest challenges that face media organizations? And I say media organizations because that could be a broadcaster, it could be many different media companies when they are considering launching a streaming channel. Whether it is a linear fast channel or maybe there's some on-demand content.
Jesse, I'll go first since I tend to talk to these folks. I would say the challenge differs from organization to organization. So, for instance, an O&O network affiliate understands video, understands it's a constant deadline, and you're constantly a couple minutes away from being on air, and you get that. But if you were, say, I don't know what the right phrase is, a marketing organization who publishes a regional luxury magazine like, Philadelphia Today, that keeps up with the socialites, etc. These people tend to have a ton of great feet on the street selling ads and being in the right places for news, but they've never done video before. So for them, video is a gigantic hurdle. And that seems to be their barrier. But for folks who are already in the video business, maybe, let's say you're not an O&O network affiliate, but rather a production house, and you've been focusing on a particular genre of content. For that group, they've got the content down and nailed because they've been syndicated for years. But what they don't have a whole ton of experience with is, how do I take all of our wonderful, incredible productions and make them into a 24/7 linear channel? And this is where organizations like Telview and organizations like Brooklyn Media can come into play to help those folks fill in those, I don't want to say intellectual deficits, but maybe experience deficits of creating and running with things. And lastly, the most important thing, content, then advertising, then technology. I see folks who spend so much time talking about technology, they fail to realize that it's the least of their concerns, where the biggest concern is should be either content or advertising. Without those, those two are hard, the solutions are easy. So focusing on those types of things is what I think most folks really need to, buckle down and get serious about, should they wish to go fast or OTT.
Yeah, and
Jesse, any thoughts?
I'll just chime in. In terms of challenges, there's also, there's kind of a whole grade here in terms of, all right, if you have content, you want to create an OTT channel. And especially if you want that to be a fast, what we really think of as a fast channel, what platform will that channel be carried in? How are you going to present it? And especially if you're looking for carriage in one of the more significant platforms, that's obviously one of the biggest challenges. We often run across maybe hyper-local broadcasters that we work with who hear about fast. They're really excited about it. Like, oh, this is great. And we hear, you're doing that. We want to do that too. We want to launch a fast channel. Well, what does that really mean? Are they thinking they are going to now be in Pluto TV? Well, they have to negotiate carriage, with the platform to get into a major platform like that. And oftentimes there's a disconnect, like, oh, I didn't realize that would be so difficult. So as Jerry mentioned, it's about the content. It's about the audience building, because if you don't have really exciting content and demonstrating the eyeballs, it will be a big challenge. You won't get into the major platforms, but that also doesn't preclude you from jumping in, the game here. And that's, I think, one of the things that's exciting. You can start OTT channels and even fast channels without necessarily getting into the major platforms. You can do it on your own. That may start simply as, your own branded apps on, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, maybe your own mobile apps. So, there are a lot of companies out there that will offer tools for, media companies and hyperlocal broadcasters to get in the game. And that's a way to kind of get warmed up, grow your audience, and then hopefully build that audience to a point where you can get into the major platforms.
A distribution platform really, that's where the monetization that everyone, when they hear fast, they seem to think that it's surrounded by dollar symbols, but they don't have the experience to realize that, Twitch and Pluto and Tubi and everybody else does not want a channel that gets 100 views a day, right? They want thousands upon thousands of views an hour. And you need scale and density to do that. So there's got to be a natural growth evolution, and it's got to be market focused and quality content focused so that you can build that viewership. When Phil was talking about,
yeah.
Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I think marketing is one of the crucial aspects of it. 10 years ago, I had one EPG and maybe one or two streaming VOD platforms where I would go to a landing page to look for content, right? Now I've got a plethora of not only streaming platforms, but cable platforms or virtual TV, Sling, Fubo, the likes, right, to go and get content. So how do you get your channels and your content in front of the right people? And that's one of the trickiest things I see is we take, fast channels globally as well, is getting, once you launch on a fast platform, you may be on the landing page the first month, but what happens in month 2, month 3? How do you maintain that ability to have your content in front of the right people when they come to watch something, when they come to consume, right? Because there's so much out there to go through these days, and it's for every genre too. I mean, there's 10, 15 kids channels, there's 10, 15 sports channels, there's 10, 15 true crime type genre channels out there nowadays. So how do you maintain that connection with your eyeballs that you want to catch?
Jerry, I think you were going to say something there, and then I'll get back to the questions. Am I right?
While we're still close to the idea of content and challenges, one of the anecdotes I can share with everybody about linear channel origination and what's valuable and what's not. Many folks have told me at many a trade show, and multi-video platform distributors, the story is often the same. They'll say something along the lines of, we don't care which news network goes offline or which other channel goes offline. We'll hear about it in 10 to 15 minutes. But if we have a channel with local high school sports airing and that channel goes down, the switchboard locks in a heartbeat and we've got all hands on deck. And I think that speaks to the power of uniquely local content and the power of unique content, so that when you find those people who are, very interested in what you're putting out, it will stick with you and it will build. So if you have the ability to get regionalized content, especially high school sports, I think that will always bring eyes to your platform. I've never heard of anyone saying, nobody watches the high school sports. I've yet to hear it. And that's
interesting.
Based on 15 years at Telview.
That's interesting, because that was going to be my next question. There's a whole issue of rights. And if you're a local broadcaster or if you're any other media organization, you're going to need the rights to be able to distribute that content. I'm sure that geofencing probably plays into that. Maybe there are other strategies that can be used so that you can secure the rights for a given region, area, market. But they also have many of these organizations have lots and lots of local content that they've already generated, local newscast stories that may not make air that maybe they distribute on other online platforms. And high school sports, as you said, are 24-hour weather or something else like that. So there are some avenues. I'm just wondering what's been the experience out there with securing rights on an affordable basis, I guess, so that uh, you can actually program an OTT channel.
I'll just chime in and just a little further on the sports side in high school sports. We do run into that a lot where there are organizations who are involved with, whether it's the actual, production and video side of the sports. They can be public educational government broadcast channels who are involved as well. And sometimes it gets thorny again because of the rights issues. They may be thinking, oh, this is great. Why don't we take some of this content and, really try to expand and monetize, which can work quite well. But oftentimes there are other organizations involved that have already locked up those rights, whether it's someone like a Huddle or another player out there.
And National Federation of High School Sports, right?
They have exactly.
Yes, that's the biggest one.
Consume it on their subscriber-based platform as well.
Right. So, I think it's interesting too, as those who are closer to content like hyperlocal content like sports, and they make these decisions on what they're doing with those rights as the tools become easier and easier to launch your own channels and you have opportunities to monetize in different ways. There may be kind of a second thought on how quickly organizations are, willing to give up their rights to some of these organizations.
Yeah.
So we have several questions coming in from our audience, and we'll get through these. Francis wants to know, how do you see brands being able to build a streaming channel from content that's made for social media or short form sorts of content?
That's a great question. Rick, do you want to?
I'm just reading it right now. Sorry. Yeah, I think it's a great idea, right? So when you have a brand or a content genre where you have access to a lot of fresh content, those seem to be within the fast realm, the ones that tend to do the best. I think the hard part again is finding the right platform to put it on to engage with your customers, right? And there's a lot of different ones, like the large kind of scaled ones that are kind of multi-platformed, meaning you don't have to have a specific set-top box or TV to watch it with, like a Pluto or somebody like that. Those are great, but again, these are mature, right? And they want lots and lots of eyeballs on that. So I think if your content is something global, like your Mr. Beast or somebody, obviously every platform in the world is going to want you. However, if you've got more of a localized or a real subgenre of content that has a smaller audience, you really don't want to get diluted in those large platforms. You want to find a way to engage directly with those guys. And that may be your own OTT streaming platform or app where you can kind of capture that audience on an ongoing basis, right? Where you're not lost in the field of a bunch of other channels or VOD content. So I think it's a great way to do it, because I think in the end, when you really look at where the best return on investment is still within local advertising, right? Even the large, kind of global brands that do fast, the best return, per minute, so to speak, would be if you can actually engage with somebody locally in a local community and a local advertiser. That's where you still get the best return. So it's a great idea, but I think you got to be really careful about how you set that up and target it.
Rick, this is kind of going to be for you and for Jerry, because again, it's like the second time at least that I've heard, you have to have enough eyeballs. In other words, you have to have a large enough audience to be able to monetize this content. And on the other hand, Jerry's, talking about being inundated or being several people saying at trade shows to him that they get inundated with telephone calls if the local high school sports goes out for some reason, that channel goes out. In Texas, I guess there's a maybe it's all over the United States. I don't know, huge audience for high school football. I know that, but
Yep.
what's been the experience with being able to attract enough eyeballs to football or to some of these other sports that maybe the rights aren't locked up like they are for high school football?
Speaking to just sports for a little bit, it varies from state to state. Some state athletic associations sign just a blanket contract with Huddle or NFHS, National Federation of High School Sports, and there's nothing you can really do to get around those kinds of things other than deal with the platform itself and forge some kind of partnership. But as far as developing the viewership base, that's critical, because that's, when people hear fast, they think of, traffic, third party ads being trafficked into your channel that you didn't do anything for. And that's what everybody really wants. But not many people can get there because they just don't have a significant amount of eyes to generate real money. If you're looking at anywhere from $6 to $10 per thousand impressions, it takes quite a few eyes to make it worth the effort. Now, worth the effort is the key understanding, and that's just basic business there of, what's our overhead, what are our costs to run this? And obviously, if you don't have to make content, you have a big cost thing, not an issue anymore. You just have to worry about getting into distribution and getting advertising out there to bring eyes in. But if you also have to make content and do all those other things, your break even is going to be much higher. So it will vary based on what kind of organization you are and how you're set up, and also, your ability to sell your own advertising. Because until you can get to a critical mass where somebody like Fubo is interested in picking you up for your geography, your genre, you've got to be out there scrapping on your own.
Yeah, I think one of the issues initially has been where these people who have gathered up, like the high school, you mentioned the Texas high school football, and there are a lot of eyeballs in Texas for high school football. However, these platforms are kind of, built initially on a large scale where they're using programmatic kind of advertising, right? And programmatic is nice. However, you're not really getting the best value out of, the inventory that you have, I think, because it's just using kind of like the old digital strategy to fill ad space. So I think you really do have to then, take it to the next level to segregate it off a bit more and be more specific with a platform that really targets just, Texas football, for example. And I think you're starting to see it more and more because of cost of remote production and the whole infrastructure to support these types of channels. You're seeing kind of secondary and tertiary sports leagues, start to, broadcast their events as well. So you've got like rugby sevens, you've got, pickleball's a great example of one that really just took off. Now that's on ESPN. However, initially, people didn't think that would be anything that people would want to watch. So you're seeing, national lacrosse leagues, you're seeing, MLS obviously, but there's other soccer leagues, baseball leagues that are, starting to, become, content factories, so to speak, with more direct advertising and locally sold advertising to support them.
Another question from the audience. I think I threw the term geofencing out there. They would like to know what geofencing is, and and how do you secure it contractually? My idea when I threw that word out there was that it would be possible to identify IP addresses and by region and kind of limit the distribution to that area if that's what the contract called for. Correct me if I'm wrong about that, and please talk about securing such rights contractually.
Yeah, just a
I,
little more on the geofencing. Again, so for streaming, as you mentioned, Phil, that's all about magic that most of the CDNs can handle at this point in terms of recognizing where a viewer is coming from via their IP address. So I think that's pretty standard technology now across all the streaming CDNs that they support geofencing. So that does give you the ability to, create these types of, geofenced areas around content. Of course, like, any technology like this, there can be ways around it. I'm sure most of you know about using something like a VPN to try to get around geofencing, where you hop on a VPN that makes it look like you are, on the internet someplace else. It could be another country, another state, and that may be a way to work around geofencing. So I think that's kind of like radar detectors. Back in the day, there's a little bit of a back and forth where the CDNs are always trying to, improve that. The service providers use additional tricks like, tracking who the major VPN providers are and what IP addresses they use. Those IPs can go into, a list. So a given service can now compare and say, oh, wait a minute, that looks like it's coming from a VPN. I'm not going to trust that it's really from this particular region. So you see that now with YouTube TV, and YouTube is offering, NFL games. People will try to, work around those regional issues with a VPN, and YouTube's, constantly trying to find ways to thwart that. But, in terms of it being viable, I think just the fact that you see a player like YouTube partnering with NFL, using geofencing as their primary technique here, I think that kind of proves that it is viable, even though, there are some potential issues to deal with.
Yeah, there's always going to be people that can defeat whatever technology you have. So don't lose any sleep over it. Accept it. It's part of the landscape. It's going to happen. Instead, focus on how do we come up with content to go beyond the geofence, because what is the point of the geofence? It's to respect the DMA boundaries. But if you're a business that you're making your own content, that content, because you've created it, it's not a syndication, you can now send it to the entire world. And that's where I think you need to focus. Yes, geofencing will protect you and keep you within the scope of your distribution contract, but you should be focusing on doing things that will get you above and beyond and outside, because that's where you can be stuck to the 5 counties that your DMA covers, or you can be stuck in 5 countries. You got to take your pick.
So another question from the audience here. I don't know exactly how you're going to feel about this, because you're primarily focused on the streaming side. But there's a question that says, perhaps you can address ATSC3 OTA broadcast/IP multicast and how it fits into the mix, if at all. And I just as a fellow who reports on this constantly, I'll say the most recent sorts of developments in this regard may be what Sinclair is calling broadcast-enabled streaming television, or BEST TV, and what I think Pearl and some of the others call IP broadcast. So specifically as relates to broadcast and streaming, I can tell you that there is the ability now to transmit over the air just a few bits of information that will appear in the electronic program guide on a television set. Now, you're not transmitting the whole channel, you're just transmitting the data to say that a certain channel exists. And for viewers who are watching on a smart TV that's connected via the internet, then the viewer can select that like they would select any other channel from the electronic program guide, and the TV will go out and retrieve that, and it'll be streamed, and they'll never know the difference. And the benefit to the broadcasters is they save bits, especially in this very constrained bandwidth situation that we're in right now, where the 3.0 transition is being done on a voluntary basis, and essentially broadcasters and markets are ganged up on one stick and sharing one channel in most markets right now, and all the rest of the over-the-air bandwidth is devoted to 1.0. So that's one of the most recent developments. I hope that addresses some of this. Obviously, there's a whole streaming side to ATSC3 as well, but that's one recent application. And we've seen that happen in Omaha, for instance. Sinclair's offering this to PBS through the Association of Public Television Stations, offering it to public broadcasters for free to support this sort of transmission, and then Sinclair themselves, and I'm sure Pearl broadcasters are doing similar sorts of things. Anyhow, I've said enough. Let's ask our guests. What about ATSC3 broadcast and IP?
Again, just adding on to what you mentioned, Phil. The idea of effectively, or the equivalent of fast channels over ATSC 3.0, which is using streaming technology under the hood. So now you get into the terminology game. Is fast limited to strictly over the internet, or if we think of ATSC 3.0 leveraging streaming, are these channels also called fast channels, or you use the term best channels as well? I think it's clear that this, I think we'll see more and more of these effectively, free linear TV channels over ATSC 3.0. That's a great application, and that I think will, as we see adoption increase for next gen TV, we should see an explosion of channels. Whether you call them fast, best, it's going to be ripe for just seeing more and more channels launched.
Anyone else?
I would just add that Jesse and I sit in between New York and Philadelphia, and we've spoken to channels in both markets about, hey, if we do best, we want it to be different than, our main network feed. And, how do we originate something like that? And they are focusing solely on going after their own content, expanding what they're bringing in for that content in preparation for that, so that they can truly do without the geofence and go after eyes that are not in their traditional market of their DMA. So there's a lot of research, but other than Omaha that you've mentioned, I've not seen anyone really taking that next serious step.
Yeah, I think that's one of the advantages is, right, it potentially becomes more addressable to the viewers, and you can do a better job of monetizing that way.
Indeed.
So I'm sorry, I thought you were finished, Rick.
No, I'm done.
Okay. We still taking your questions, audience. I'm going to get back to my list here to cover a few other aspects. If we shift to the workflows, many broadcasters, already have, and when I say broadcasters, I mean local affiliates and independents and O&Os. They already have workflows strategies put in place, and I think a lot of people might look at them as specific silos. There's master control, traffic, scheduling, playout, monitoring, et cetera, et cetera. How does that approach to getting something on air fit in a world where these same media these same channels are looking to take advantage of streaming and OTT? Do they somehow integrate all that into the OTT world, or do they have just separate workflows? So what makes the most sense?
What I have seen is that the individual islands of broadcast, which you mentioned, we've got our traffic and billing, master control, content, etc. That does not lend itself financially to being a viable strategy for new or small market folks coming up. Too many contracts, too much money, too many moving pieces, too much experience required. For the O&Os, you've lived and breathed this since the 50s, not a big deal. But for everybody else trying to get into the game, they are very much not interested in working with 9 different solutions to make a channel happen. They're interested in working with 1, maybe 2. A lot of these folks will go on the research curve, and they'll come to organizations like Telview, and maybe they decide, well, geez, we don't want to have technical folks doing this kind of stuff, so maybe we should sub all of this out and find an expert in making the channel happen for us so we can focus on what we're good at. And that's generally what we recommend, is focus on what you're good at and find external resources, especially like Rick's organization, to do that other hard part for you so that you can focus on what you're good at, be it advertising or be it content creation. But the idea of a new player building the islands of broadcast, it doesn't happen anymore that I've seen.
Yeah, I'd
What do you
agree
think?
with that. Yeah, you can take your traditional broadcast channel, and if you have the rights, of course, create a streaming version of that and send it to FAST platforms or other streaming platforms. However, you're not taking advantage of, hyper general, genre content, or, with the potential to maybe localize it as well. So at one point, it probably would be best to create individual streams per regions, per type of platform. So I think, but the problem is, I think, is the traditional cost of launching broadcast channels is expensive relative to the return on some of, especially initially in the FAST world, right? So you got to make it as cost effectively as possible, and that's where I think you're seeing, and I know Telview's worked on this, and we've worked on that with them together, is how do you automate as much as possible things like programming or EPG creation, or ad break insertions, because different platforms require different ad break structures, right? So instead of having people sit around and look at content, can you automate that process? And that's where I think there's been a lot of new initiatives in the past few years to automate a lot of these workflows, to make launching different platforms with subgenres of content into different regions.
We have a question from one of our viewers. I'd like to know, how do you go about monitoring basically OTT and FAST channels? Is there some sort of return feed that is offered in the distribution, the whole chain of distribution out to the viewer, that will ensure the quality of what's being distributed?
Yeah, I think, Jesse, do you guys want to talk about how you do a monitoring from a origination perspective and a network perspective? And then I can maybe talk about how you do the downstream.
Yeah, that's a Jesse
Sure.
one.
Yep. So, and again, some of this is dependent on how, these channels are ultimately delivered, because there can be, certainly a variety of delivery mechanisms at the technical level, whether it is a HLS stream that is, pushed in to another CDN from, a partner who's involved, or sometimes there can be direct streams like a, secure, reliable transport SRT stream that's pushed. So, sometimes depending on the delivery mechanism, there are different analysis tools that are used in the chain. But normally, you have something, like a, video stream analyzer in the mix. Sometimes playout solutions and software have some of their own integrated monitoring that's built right in as well. And you usually want these at different places in the chain. And then likewise, there's the ultimate return. Where is that final channel, being delivered? And oftentimes there are going to be tools that are employed there to monitor that streaming output. If that's an adaptive bitrate HLS stream, and again, that could be provided by the final platform. So if you're delivering into a Pluto TV, for example, they're going to have their own tools as well. So really, it's kind of a mix of pretty classic video analysis tools that will be used, maybe different tools depending on that distribution, and they're typically located at different points throughout the chain. So if you're part of a larger platform, you probably have that platform itself doing that key analysis and handling that part. If you're doing something like your own OTT channel, kind of a self-branded, owned and operated, then that may be, at a different point. So again, you kind of get that whole scale depending on whether you're doing it more owned and operated or through a platform.
Yeah, we do a
Rick,
lot
did
of
you want to talk a little bit more? Oh,
Yeah, we do a lot of video monitoring if we can get feeds in along points of the chain. So we'll have an origin point coming out from us. We'll have a return feed from a taker somewhere, or maybe a satellite downlink if it's a traditional broadcast channel as a return feed. But as Jesse was mentioning, it can get kind of complicated in this world of OTT and FAST, where we may be originating a channel, we might hand it off to create a stream and hand it off to Jesse, who integrates it into his kind of CDN mux for streaming, so to speak. And then they're handing it off to somebody who could be like a whirl in between that's going to a Samsung, and Samsung in one region is using Whirl CDN, but in another region they might be using their own CDN. So, and then obviously there's the next step of going to the actual devices that people watch on as well. So it gets pretty complex in there. So I mean, what we've done is create kind of one point of contact for anybody along that chain. And then as much as you can see into the streams, whether it's technically or visually, we try to do that as much as possible as well. Because if we can see visually, it's the return feed from the catcher at, platform A, then we know that, origin, CDN are working well, but it's something with that device specifically. So we can troubleshoot a lot faster. And I think that's probably one of the tricky parts of it, where you have so many different kind of handoffs in this chain now. It's really hard to troubleshoot where it's at, and it's really, in some cases, it's hard to actually get return feeds as well. So it's intricate, but I think progress has been made there to get more advanced in that. But it's still one of the kind of difficulties you have as seeing an end-to-end system across OTT.
let's talk a little bit more about monetization and streaming, whether it's OTT or FAST. Rick, I believe you said that the biggest bang for the effort, I guess, from a revenue point of view, would be commercial insertion, not the programmatic sorts of revenue models for ads, but actually going out and selling time into a FAST channel, for instance. I was wondering, could you discuss that a little bit more, everyone? And also, are there other revenue sources that can be derived, other sorts of advertising placement, or something else that those who are considering a FAST channel might cash in on?
Yeah. I think I'll jump in kind of on the monetization aspect of this initially, because there was another question about we talked about it earlier about brands creating streaming channels, and I think you look at Dude Perfect, I think is a great example of that, right? Just a bunch of guys shooting hoops off of garages, et cetera, and now they have this big empire. Where and the way they're monetizing is they're doing, not only are they doing kind of localized content and local insertions and selling, because they have such wide distribution now, they can sell localized ads on their content, but they're also monetizing from a merchandising perspective as well. And I think if you really want to marry this all together, you have to have a really good second screen environment, and as well as kind of an offline portal, so to speak, where you're engaging not only on the streaming platform but via social, via Instagram, via X or whoever else out there, where you're engaging with these viewers to create a kind of a triangulated viewership, so to speak, and a second screen experience. When my teenage boys watch TV or watch a basketball game, they're on their phones the whole time, right? So how do you capture that as one kind of ecosystem to be able to monetize based upon that? You know, you got to be able to sell that shoe via the streaming or via the pop-up that comes up on the ads that he's looking at on his phone. And so I think the more you can take advantage of that, the more you'll be able to maximize that. And I think, and Jesse, maybe you guys can speak, and Jerry can speak to, you know, the local, you guys do extremely localized content, and how do they engage with advertisers and viewers?
From my seats, I see two two avenues. You know, for your, you know, one is more like your PBS like idea where you're selling sponsorship for a particular genre or program itself. That elevates up, you know, into the next level, which is pay to play, where a channel might go out and hustle up 6 or 10 advertisers, and those advertisers will just get put in a run a schedule loop, and it will look more like traditional programmatic where, you know, you got 8 minutes and then an ad break and 8 minutes and an ad break, and that is directly programmed, you know, quite simplistically, directly programmed in their broadcast playout, and that's their monetization going forward. And then the third level of it is now, you know, and this is what all, you know, channel originators do, is they create their channel and then they put in their national ads, and they also will put a trigger in for local avail cover, just like it's always happened in over the air. And now your local folks, you know, your downstream in fast, etc., can now traffic those ads, and that's money that you didn't have at all, and you really didn't do anything other than create a critical viewing mass, make a good channel, and do right by putting in proper triggers, etc. So it just depends on how far you want to go through that evolution. Jesse, what do you think?
Yeah, just you know, chiming in beyond the you know, the you know, kind of standard ad triggers and downstream ads, as Rick mentioned. You know, tapping into interactivity, you know, things like in-app purchases, second screen. That does open up a lot of opportunity. Kind of interesting, looping back to what we were talking about with, you know, also next gen TV and ATSC 3.0, and the ability to have, you know, two-way through an internet connectivity as well. That opens up those possibilities for those types of channels as well. So I think that does, you know, that in-app purchase, you know, click to buy, is, you know, really can represent a significant revenue generation opportunity.
We have just a few minutes. Just if you could just give this a minute or so. Francis wants to know, what are there any effective strategies to garner the attention of OTT and fast TV on a collaborative basis, finding partners, I presume, to help with a launch and programming?
Effective strategies? Yeah, I don't think I clearly understand the question.
I think what Francis is getting at is, how do you get more attention from partners that may support you with your channel? Okay.
Well, I think
that's what I take away from that.
It depends on who the partner is. Everybody has a pressure point. If it's the distribution platform, you know, no disrespect intended, but they only care about how many people view your channel, period. Focus entirely on that. If you're looking to create a micro niche, obviously now you've got a completely different sell. You are looking for other believers, fanatics like you, and those will come along very easily. In regards to an effective strategy for vendor side, I would say you should always be looking at their history. How long have they been doing this? How long have they been doing HD? How, you know, do they understand web streaming? What, you know, do they have deployed apps? Just going And, this shouldn't be news to anybody, but you never want to go and be the patient of the first patient of a surgeon fresh out of medical school. You want to be the 1,000th, the 10,000th. Why would you want to be the first channel deployed by this new technology? Dangerous. Find folks who've been doing it forever, because they know the things that you don't even know to ask yet. In my relationship with Rick over the last bunch of years, I've learned a ton, and I've been doing video and video channel distribution and creation since the mid 80s. Look at me, I'm an old fart, and I'm still learning things from Rick, because Rick has different scar tissue and is decades deep in a different segment. If you find somebody that's months deep, good luck.
Okay, we're really short on time, but I'd like to give each Telview and Brooklyn Media each a minute to tell us a little bit more about your offerings, and then we'll wrap this up.
All right, Jerry, you want to just tell a little more? I kind of gave the intro at the beginning. You want to talk a little bit more?
I would just say Telview has been in the linear origination game for decades, not months. We've been doing HD since before the off-air world went HD. So all of these things are old hat to us. Our first cloud service was 2002. Let that sink in. So we're here to do this. This is all that we do. We don't also have, other things. We focus on linear origination and getting your channel out there. That's really what we do. Whether it be hardware or hosted, we have all the solutions you need.
Okay, thank you.
What about you, Rick?
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, quickly. So Brooklyn Media, we're kind of like a distribution partner in the physical world. Who our partners. They aggregate and create content, and they give it to us. They give it to me on a cloud storage infrastructure, and they go out and try to sell it and market it. And then when they need to deliver it, they call me and say, "Hey, we need a linear channel to go here. We need VOD content to go to this region. We need a fast channel, or we need an OTT platform." We do that for them. And then things that you get from a typical brick and mortar service provider, like monitoring, like, infrastructure hosting, like localization of dressing sports feeds for different regions with ad insertion, where you need actually people to do that. We provide that as a service as well.
Well, that's all we have time for today. I want to thank our panelists, Jesse Lerman, Jerry Budge, and Rick Phelps. Thank you for being here, gentlemen. Before we wrap up, it's time for our prize giveaway. Today's winner of a $250 Amazon gift card is Kylie Nicholas from Arizona. Our team will be in touch after the webinar. One last thing, be sure to check out my articles and those of my colleagues at tvtech.com. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.